I was halfway through my second black coffee when she walked in. The bell above the cafe door jingled just enough to make me glance up, though I'd been pretending not to care. Mid-40s, light brown hair pulled into a careless bun, reading glasses sliding down her nose. She carried a tote that smelled faintly of lavender detergent, and she paused near the counter like she was debating whether to order or just watch people for a moment. I noticed the way she tilted her head when the barista mispronounced her name. Something about it made me want to correct him, but I didn't. Instead, I folded my napkin over and over, careful not to look too eager. "Hey," she said. Just that. No punctuation, no preamble. But when our eyes met, I felt a short circuit, like my brain had forgotten how to finish the sentence it was mid-writing. I managed a small nod. "Hey." She smiled. Not the polite, café smile, the kind that says she notices things no one else does. My coffee cup seemed heavier all of a sudden. I watched her scan the pastries, then glance back at me. "You always get the espresso?" "Yeah," I said, voice lower than I meant. "Second shot." "You?" "Latte. Extra foam. Milk from the little carton on the left." She paused like she was checking whether I was paying attention. I nodded, though I had no idea what the carton was. Somehow, she knew I'd notice. She sat a few tables away, but my eyes kept flicking over, measuring the distance. Her fingers traced the rim of her cup, small, deliberate motions. I almost asked her about the ring on her right hand, but then decided to just stare at her hands instead. Something about them, careful, patient, habitual, made the room feel smaller. My phone buzzed in my pocket. And signed text from no one. Another night alone. Another pause before typing words I'd never send. I thumbed it away and watched her laugh at something on her laptop, her head tilting in that way that suggested private amusement. I wanted to ask what was funny, but the words stuck in my throat. When she looked up, our eyes met again. Just for a second. She didn't smile this time, just acknowledged me. And in that tiny nod, I felt the weight of a quiet invitation. She stood to leave, pulling her tote across her shoulder. I realized I'd been holding my coffee like it was a lifeline. She glanced back at me as she passed, one hand flicking briefly toward the door, maybe a subconscious "see you," or maybe nothing at all. Outside, the air smelled like wet pavement and the faint exhaust of morning traffic. I wondered if she'd gone home, or to somewhere else that made the world feel bigger than my tiny apartment. My phone buzzed again, this time a text from an unknown number. I swore under my breath, fingers hesitating before unlocking the screen. "We're sharing you tonight." I dropped the phone on the table, staring at the words as if they might explain themselves if I looked long enough. My coffee had gone cold, but I didn't care. Something in me wanted to chase it, to respond, and at the same time, I didn't. I folded the napkin one last time, tucked it under my cup, and leaned back. Outside, the street was noisy, indifferent, moving on as if nothing unusual had happened. Inside, I was suddenly aware of how quiet it had gotten. I didn't know her name. I didn't know if I should reply. But somehow, I already knew I couldn't stop thinking about her. The next time I saw her, it was at the library, quiet, sun-smeared afternoon, the kind of place that smells like paper and missed deadlines. She was tucked into a corner table, a stack of history books beside her. I hadn't expected to see her, and maybe that's why I lingered at the edge of the aisle, pretending to compare a spine with another. "Hey," I said when I finally gave in. She looked up, startled for a fraction of a second, then smiled the same private smile that made everything else fade. "You always find me in the corners," she said. I shrugged, trying to sound casual. "Corners are quiet. I like corners." She laughed softly, then shifted her chair so I could sit across from her. Her fingers lingered on the edge of the table, tracing scratches I didn't notice before. There was a faint tremor, almost imperceptible, as if she wasn't used to inviting anyone this close. I didn't expect to see you here," I said, fumbling with my hands. I wanted to reach for something to bridge the silence, a pen, a book, but settled for adjusting my sleeve instead. She tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. "I come here most Saturdays." Helps me think. Or avoid thinking, maybe. She paused, then added, divorce paperwork. Stacks of it. Boring, exhausting. Never ends. Something in her voice caught me off guard. Not sadness exactly. More like the quiet fatigue of someone who carries her own world without asking anyone else to shoulder it. I nodded, unsure if I should say anything, unsure if any words would do justice. We spent the next half hour in small movements, passing a cup of tea back and forth, brushing crumbs from the edge of her notebook, comparing the marginal notes in a history book we both pretended to read. Our hands brushed once, soft, accidental, or maybe not, and I felt a flicker in my chest that I didn't try to name. I imagined scenarios while she read aloud a footnote about some long-forgotten king. Her voice was soft, calm, and for a moment, I pictured us somewhere else entirely. I imagined sitting like this every Saturday, talking about nothing and everything, and felt the dangerous pull of wanting it to be real. You know, she said suddenly, closing her book, my sister used to say I never finish things. Stories, letters, sometimes even people. Her gaze flicked toward me, like she wasn't sure if she should be honest, but decided it was too late to stop. I blinked. Maybe some people just need someone to notice. The words slipped out before I could stop them. Awkward, unfinished, but sincere. She looked at me for longer than I expected. Not judging, not teasing, just seeing. A quiet acknowledgement that mattered more than anything she could have said. Then she stood, sliding her chair back. Her hand brushed the back of mine as she gathered her bag. I felt it linger for a heartbeat longer than necessary. Not a declaration, not even a promise, just a small, fragile gesture that meant more than it seemed. I watched her go, and for some reason, the empty table felt warmer. I didn't know why that moment stayed with me. Maybe because it felt like someone finally saw me. It was late evening, the kind of Thursday where the streetlights blur the edges of everything, and the cafe down the block was nearly empty. I'd arrived first, pretending to read on my phone, but really listening for the sound of her heels against the hardwood. She came in, slower than usual. Something in her posture, shoulders tight, hands gripping her bag strap, made me hesitate before standing. Hey, I said, my voice quieter than I'd intended. Hey. She didn't smile. Not yet. Not like last week. She slid into the chair across from me, and I noticed the way she kept glancing at the door, half expecting someone to appear. We ordered coffee. I stirred mine more than necessary, flicking my eyes toward her hands on the table, noticing the faint tremor again. She picked at the edge of her sleeve, eyes fixed somewhere beyond me. I didn't want to bother you, she said finally, almost a whisper. You're not a bother, I said, and it came out too fast, too eager. I cursed myself internally. My hands curled around the cup, knuckles white. There was a pause. The kind of pause that stretches long enough for a person to imagine other things, other words, other touches. I wanted to ask her something personal, something small, but every question felt like a test I wasn't ready to fail. A friend of hers walked in, a bright laugh, a hand on her shoulder, and suddenly the room felt crowded. She stiffened, eyes darting toward me, a subtle shake of her head that I almost missed. I looked away, pretending to check my phone, but my chest felt tight. When the friend left, she didn't relax immediately. She sipped her coffee slowly, fingers brushing mine once as she set the cup down. A small, accidental contact, or maybe intentional. My heart thudded in that way that makes you forget the air exists. I wanted to reach, wanted to say something that would break the hesitation, but the words tangled in my throat. Her gaze flicked up, catching mine. Long enough for a thought to almost escape, and then she leaned forward slightly, just a bit too close, eyes searching mine as if testing the boundary. My hand twitched, unsure whether to cover hers or just leave it. My mouth opened, closed. Tried again. The door jingled. Another late customer, a distraction, a reminder that we weren't alone in this tiny, shared world. She pulled back, a half smile, half apology. The tension broke, but only a little. We left soon after. Walking outside, the cold air biting at our cheeks, our steps matched without thinking. Side by side, silent, until she stopped at a street corner. "You, take care," she said, not looking at me. "You too." My voice was low. She reached out, briefly brushing my sleeve with her fingers. Not a touch that promised anything, just acknowledgement. My chest ached for a second, and then she was gone, swallowed by the streetlights and the sound of passing cars. I stood there longer than I should have, replaying the moment. Close enough to almost something. I didn't know what it meant, and I didn't know if I wanted it to. But I knew I would think about it for days. It was late evening, the kind of Thursday where the streetlights blur the edges of everything, and the cafe down the block was nearly empty. I'd arrived first, pretending to read on my phone, but really listening for the sound of her heels against the hardwood. She came in, slower than usual. Something in her posture, shoulders tight, hands gripping her bag strap, made me hesitate before standing. "Hey," I said, my voice quieter than I'd intended. "Hey." She didn't smile. Not yet. Not like last week. She slid into the chair across from me, and I noticed the way she kept glancing at the door, half expecting someone to appear. We ordered coffee. I stirred mine more than necessary, flicking my eyes toward her hands on the table, noticing the faint tremor again. She picked at the edge of her sleeve, eyes fixed somewhere beyond me. "I didn't want to bother you," she said finally, almost a whisper. "You're not a bother," I said, and it came out too fast, too eager. I cursed myself internally. My hands curled around the cup, knuckles white. There was a pause. The kind of pause that stretches long enough for a person to imagine other things, other words, other touches. I wanted to ask her something personal, something small, but every question felt like a test I wasn't ready to fail. A friend of hers walked in, a bright laugh, a hand on her shoulder, and suddenly the room felt crowded. She stiffened, eyes darting toward me, a subtle shake of her head that I almost missed. I looked away, pretending to check my phone, but my chest felt tight. When the friend left, she didn't relax immediately. She sipped her coffee slowly, fingers brushing mine once as she set the cup down. A small, accidental contact, or maybe intentional. My heart thudded in that way that makes you forget the air exists. I wanted to reach, wanted to say something that would break the hesitation, but the words tangled in my throat. Her gaze flicked up, catching mine, long enough for a thought to almost escape, and then she leaned forward slightly, just a bit too close, eyes searching mine as if testing the boundary. My hand twitched, unsure whether to cover hers or just leave it. My mouth opened, closed. Tried again. The door jingled. Another late customer, a distraction, a reminder that we weren't alone in this tiny, shared world. She pulled back, a half smile, half apology. The tension broke, but only a little. We left soon after. Walking outside, the cold air biting at our cheeks, our steps matched without thinking. Side by side, silent, until she stopped at a street corner. "You, take care," she said, not looking at me. "You too." My voice was low. She reached out, briefly brushing my sleeve with her fingers. Not a touch that promised anything, just acknowledgement. My chest ached for a second, and then she was gone, swallowed by the streetlights and the sound of passing cars. I stood there longer than I should have, replaying the moment. Close enough to almost something. I didn't know what it meant, and I didn't know if I wanted it to. But I knew I would think about it for days. I hadn't heard from her all week. Not a text, not a missed call, not even a like on some random photo. I checked my phone more times than I'd like to admit, staring at the blank conversation like it might suddenly speak. When I saw her at the cafe on Friday, she was different. Her smile was there, yes, but it didn't reach her eyes. She ordered her usual latte, but didn't glance at me while she waited. I felt like a stranger occupying a familiar seat. "Hey," I said, sliding into the chair across from her anyway. She didn't respond right away. She picked at the corner of a napkin, eyes tracing the lines as if they contained some hidden map. Finally, "Hey," she said. Not her usual warmth, not her usual attention. Just a sound. We talked in fragments. Work. The weather. A minor inconvenience at the grocery store. Nothing about us. Nothing about the week I'd been replaying in my head, every pause, every brush of her hand. Then I noticed it. A photo tucked in her bag. A boy, maybe 8, smiling too big for the frame. I couldn't tell if it was her son or a nephew. My throat closed up. "Oh," I said, way too quietly. She didn't answer. Just adjusted the strap of her bag, fingers curling around it tightly. She didn't meet my eyes again. I wanted to ask, but the words lodged somewhere between my ribs and my throat. Instead, I sipped my coffee slowly, watching her trace faint scratches on the table. I imagined a dozen scenarios, none of them comforting. Later, as I left, she murmured, "Take care." No hand on the sleeve, no lingering glance. Just the words. I walked home with the city buzzing around me, feeling the strange emptiness of a paused life. I didn't feel heartbroken. I felt paused, like life forgot to finish the sentence. I drafted a text that I never sent. "Are you okay? Did I do something?" I stared at it for 5 minutes before deleting it. The blinking cursor felt accusatory, impatient, and fragile all at once. The next morning, I went to our usual bench near the coffee shop. Empty. Not her. Not the thermos she always brought. Just the damp wood, puddles reflecting the gray sky. I waited longer than I should have, imagining her footsteps approaching. But the minutes stretched, the empty bench only reinforcing the silence. I traced the edge of the bench with my fingers, feeling the grooves and imperfections, thinking about how little had actually changed, and how much everything felt suspended. I wanted to knock on her door, but I didn't. I wanted to call, but I didn't. I wanted to ask, to demand, to plead, but I couldn't find the words that felt safe. So I left the bench as it was, a seat saved for someone who might never return. It was Saturday morning. The sky had that flat, washed-out gray that makes everything feel smaller, quieter. I found her at the laundromat, folding towels the way someone folds them when they're thinking about everything except the task at hand. "Hey," I said, hesitating by the dryer. She looked up, eyebrows slightly raised, as if deciding whether I belonged here. "Hey," she said finally, voice steady but not warm. I nodded toward the pile of towels. "Need a hand?" She shook her head, then paused. "Actually, could you?" Her smile was brief, tentative. We folded side by side, fingers brushing over cotton now and then. I tried not to notice it, tried not to linger too long on how her sleeve slipped slightly, revealing a scar along her wrist. I almost said something, almost asked if it mattered, but I stayed quiet. The machines hummed, punctuating the silence, and I realized how long it had been since I'd shared a space with someone and felt seen without speaking. She hesitated, then placed a towel down and leaned back slightly. "I didn't mean to pull away," she said, almost whispering. I don't know how to do this. How to let someone in and not mess it up." I looked at her, really looked, and for the first time, I stopped imagining all the scenarios and just accepted the one that was happening. "I don't care about perfect," I said. "I just want you here. Right now." Her eyes softened, and for a heartbeat, I thought the world had shrunk to this corner of a laundromat, to this moment, to the way her hands moved almost unconsciously as she smoothed the folds. She laughed softly, almost embarrassed. "You make it sound too simple." I shrugged, not sure if I should touch her hand or leave it there hovering between us. I let it hover. She noticed. She didn't pull away. The quiet stretched. I realized that saying more might ruin it, might make it too heavy, too precise. Sometimes, the right words aren't the ones you say. They're the ones you let linger in the air, where both of you can feel them without needing proof. Finally, she looked at me, eyes steady, and said the smallest thing that meant everything. "Okay." I nodded. My fingers brushed hers. Not a declaration, not a promise, just a connection that confirmed we were both here, in the same fragile space, without pretense, without drama. The dryers buzzed, the coins clinking in their slots, and we returned to folding towels. Side by side, close enough that the warmth was almost unbearable, small enough that nothing had to be defined. I didn't know what came next. Didn't need to. For now, the quiet was enough. It was 8:47 a.m. exactly, though neither of us checked the clock. The cafe smelled like burnt coffee and old newspapers, the same one where I'd first noticed her hands brushing over a napkin. She was already seated at our usual corner table, latte steaming, thermos tucked beside her. I slid into the chair across from her, careful not to disturb the faint warmth radiating from the seat. We didn't need to greet each other. The silence between us was comfortable now. No more testing, no more hesitations. Just the quiet acknowledgement that we were present. "I got the black coffee today," I said, lifting my cup. She nodded, a faint smile tugging at her lips. We sipped in tandem. I watched the steam curl, noticed the way her hair caught the morning light. A week ago, a month ago, I might have felt anxious, uncertain. Now, there was only the ease of routine, the subtle intimacy of shared space, shared habits. Later, we walked to the bench near the park. The one with peeling paint and damp wood, where so many small moments had started and stopped between us. She leaned back, folding her arms across her chest, eyes on the passing leaves. I sat beside her, close but not too close, letting the air carry the weight of everything we'd navigated. "You still notice the little things," she said softly. "Like the bench, the coffee, the exact time we sit." "I do," I admitted. "I notice everything, even when you're quiet." She turned to look at me. For a moment, there was the faintest flicker of the girl I'd met weeks ago, unsure, testing boundaries, holding back. And then she smiled, full, calm, certain. "I like that we're here," she said. "Me too," I said. There were no grand declarations, no fireworks, no dramatic proclamations. Just two people who had weathered hesitation, pulled back and leaned in, waited and risked. The kind of love that isn't shouted but remembered in the spaces between breaths, in the tiny rituals, in coffee sipped and hands brushed. We stayed there for a while, letting the world move around us. The black coffee had gone cold. The sun had shifted, leaves skittered across the pavement. Everything was ordinary, and yet everything felt fuller. As we finally rose to leave, she reached for my hand, not for a dramatic gesture, just a soft, steady touch that said everything without saying a word. I didn't let go. Walking home together, I realized that life wasn't perfect. There would be rain, there would be miscommunications, there would be days when routine felt heavy. But it would be ours. Small, deliberate, tenderly earned. And somewhere in the quiet certainty of that morning, I thought, this is enough. This is how it should feel. Did this story stay with you? What kind of quiet, real love stories do you want to hear next? Those that linger in the everyday, in the small gestures, in the pauses between words.